We're in it. We're in it.
Yay. Happy
Okay.
Pride, everybody.
Yay. That's fantastic. Love it.
These are to hand out when I go out amongst the town people. Doesn't work against the background, but happy
No, it
Pride.
always screws it all up. See, and
Yeah.
it's given me a nice super short haircut again.
Oh,
Getting
there
rid of
you
the,
go.
I might as well just cut it off because
It
this
really is knocking it
Zoom
back.
background doesn't want the back of my hair. And being told very clearly that I'm not supposed to have hair on the back, right?
No, Zoom is a demanding taskmaster, so I wouldn't change your hair just because
Doom,
Zoom is full of shenanigans.
doom is true.
Yeah.
I am gonna get you to turn your mic up just a smidge, hon, if you can. Awesome. All right. So, hello everybody. Welcome to our Fridays. While Lillian works with her volume, which is for recording purposes, I'm going to tell you what we're talking about today. So we're just going to start with Pluto and work our way down and talk about what the transits feel like when we are experiencing them. And I'm gonna tell the little story of what made me think of this, or part of it, anyways, or wanting to do this was getting a message from somebody who was experiencing. They were attributing their experience to a Saturn transit, but that wasn't the whole story.
Mhm.
And right now, because anybody who's got early degrees, any planet at an early degree of any sign is likely to be getting lots of energy from Pluto, Saturn, and Neptune, and soon to be Uranus. So, among all the other transits that you can experience. So I thought we'll start with Pluto just because that's the one that's been going on the longest for everybody. And then we'll work our way in.
I think that's great. And my notes were to um oh share with the audience that transits are what happens when the chart moves in space and time, and that there are two ways of looking at it at minimum. One is your personal chart and how you are personally being affected. And part of what we're talking about today, which is the general effect on the populace. And so they kind of weave together, but this is what we're trying to talk about, how the planets dance together.
I like that. I like it a lot. Yeah. Um, our fixed chart gets to stay where it is,
Yes,
unless you're using a technique that moves it,
exactly.
which you can. And then, but everything continues, right? We can't
Right.
stop the movement. And
That's
so
right.
we start experiencing transits right away. That moon, we come out of the birth canal and that moon starts moving immediately. And so
Yeah.
we start experiencing transits right off the bat. Um, yeah. Yep. I think that's all I had to say about transits. And I mean, so would you say when I talk to clients in session, I tend to describe progressions as being an evolution of who we are and being more internal,
Yes.
and transits can feel internal, but they are more likely to bring outer events. Would you
Oh,
agree with that?
I love that distinction. That's really cool. So I'm gonna keep trying it because it hasn't landed for me yet. When we talk about a chart, we're kind of talking about a slice of time, a moment in time, a snapshot. And when we talk about transits, we're talking about what the world is doing all around us. And when we talk about progressions, we're talking about a technique where a degree is added to the sun for every year. This is secondary progressions I'm talking about. And so it describes how you're going through your life with these twists and turns and all the intricacies of life. So, yeah, I would describe the progressions as more personal. I think that other people can perceive them, but I think that it's so subtle that it outside that it's much more impactful to describe how you are working with yourself or the energies that you are kind of subjected to now. And then again, transits, like when we talk about from Pluto in, we're talking about kind of the spiritual weather or the astrological weather. And so, for example, I'm in a really hot climate. Next week, they're saying it's going to be too hot to go outside. So it's the astrology of it can be similar to that. Pardon me. I think Rob Hand used to say in the medieval era, you would consult a chart to see if you go down a specific road. In our era, we're looking more at, is there a metaphor that describes it? Do I need to be self-reflective, or is this coming from outside and therefore I need to react in a certain way? And I love why we're talking about the transits the way we are, because so much is changing. And in terms of clients, yeah, so I would say your progress chart shows your evolution. And then usually I get the barrage of questions. What's happening now? What's going on here? Is Jupiter going to deliver what it promises? Are we going to get good stuff? All of those kind of questions, which this is going to speak right to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love that context of it too, because so the outer planets don't describe a, you don't think they describe a part of personality from an EA perspective
Uh,
or life experience.
EA is amazing, right? So if
Yeah.
we start with Pluto, Pluto is your soul, right?
Okay.
And
Okay.
so your soul is the underlying impetus for all of your movement. And then again in EA, this is what I've heard about the fundamentals. Your desire to be with God is as strong as your desire to be separate or individual. And that basic tension gets described through all of the signs and placements in a unique way, but that due to the length of time planets spend in a sign, you're sharing it with millions of other people. And so it is less individual only because you will see it in a generation, or you'll see it in a populace. Or, I don't know, we talk about boomers. I know we wanted to talk about generations, and it might be time to, not in this particular live, but in general, because it's personal, but it's also personal for your best friend and your cousin and everybody you went to school with. So yeah, it spreads out, and in that way can be more diffuse. Oh, and then I forget, what we're talking about is so individual to your chart, even if it is generational. When I went through a Pluto transit, everything got wiped off the map outside of me. A friend of mine went through a Pluto transit. It did not happen that way at all. And so Pluto for me is really finely woven into all of my daily practices due to the chart configuration. For many people, Pluto won't necessarily be activating in a way that they can see outside or even feel inside. So those are when you want to get a reading, is if you're curious about something and you need to find out where it is in your personal chart.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that's fascinating about the outer planets in a natal chart, and then versus when it happens by transit, is that the outer planet energy isn't something that we typically connect to naturally, because it's
Right.
right. It's either buried so deep like Pluto, or it's so far away, right?
Yeah.
That it's not immediately connected to, unless it's having relationships with personal planets in your chart,
Right.
or it's in the first house, because that's all about us, right?
Yeah.
So, what I find fascinating is that by transit, if you don't have that relationship in your birth chart, then all of a sudden you're introduced to this massive energy that the outer planets bring.
Well
It
said.
can be extremely discombobulating.
Yes.
And whereas if it's part of your personal story with the personal planets, it's you're coming home to that energy in whatever way that is. If it's in a difficult relationship in your natal chart, you might be returning to a difficult story. Other, if it's making an easier aspect, then you might be discovering with the maturity of age how to use that energy. So
Yeah.
it's very different experiences based on what you're living with every day, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Um, made a good point.
Check. But it's I was reading something today about how hard it is for folks because and again, I don't want to center the US, but there is a growing sense that things are changing and being nudged around, at least in the US government, almost to the point where it's getting wobbly, or certainly to the point where people are impacted. And and that's where I feel is the strongest metaphor, for the outside impacts. It's kind of the institutions, it's the things that we don't think about every day, but that we partake in. You don't have to believe in a post person, a mail person. They come to your house every day, you know, uh, the evidence is right there. And so that's another way of looking at what we're about to describe.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I laugh when people say I don't believe in astrology. I used to say, well, it's okay, it'll happen to you anyways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whatever. Believe
Yeah.
all you want. Yeah, absolutely. So some of the themes, I love Howard Sesportus's book. Um, I should have grabbed it. The
The
Gods of
changing
Change.
gods.
And
Yeah, the
so
gods have changed.
the gods of
Yeah.
change. And so Howard talks about the outers. So we're, Uranus, Pluto, Neptune. And in a very transformational way from both a psychological and a spiritual point of view. It's if you want to go in deep when it comes to, if you're a student of astrology, you want to go deep with these transits, that's a great book. And so some of the themes, that's who I
Yeah.
went to look for themes with these transits. So this is some of the stuff that came up with Pluto. And I'll say, I revisited his book when I had Pluto sitting opposite my Venus, which is still happening. I'm still in the middle of that transit. So something that I'm going
Yeah.
to add is that when we're talking about Pluto, Pluto will do anything from 3 to 5 passes based on it
Mm,
moves retrograde every year for 4 months.
that's
And
good.
so it's
Yeah.
like very back and forth. Having an outer planet retrograde in a birth chart is very common.
Hmm.
And so what happens is that it moves back and forth, and depending on the speed, it'll keep going over the same degrees 3 to 5 times.
Right.
What I'm noticing with the late in Pluto and Capricorn to the early of the Pluto and Aquarius,
Hmm.
is that Pluto is moving at such a rate that it's actually not doing the traditional 5 passes for most people.
Wow.
It is sitting, right? It's stationing at those early degrees,
Mm,
and it
mm,
was
mm.
stationing at the late degrees, which means you're
Wow.
getting long, intense, like actual perfecting of the
Yeah.
transit, as
Interesting.
opposed to the moving back and forth and back and forth, back and forth. So
Yeah.
when I'm talking to people, and I don't know if this is your experience, the so Howard says that the reason we have to have Pluto go so slowly and hit more than once is that it's digging things from very deep within that we need time to process.
Hmm.
And if it hit us all at once, we psychologically could not handle what Pluto is trying to teach us. So just think about what's happening globally right now,
Yeah.
and the fact that Pluto is doing this shorter, only 3 passes, but in these more intense, just sitting there. We're seeing like much accelerated change and transformation and death of things to be reborn. Like those are all Pluto themes, and that's what we're seeing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite Pluto themes for transits?
Well, I've been really curious about this one, and I hope my internet doesn't go out. It's a little spotty because a lot of what I'm thinking about, not necessarily talking about to clients, are the folks who have the moon in Aquarius. And I tend to think about Aquarius as kind of an abstracted, emotional experience. Um, the air signs may want to think about how they feel, which is not quite the same as feeling how they feel, or digesting emotions and then releasing them. And so there can be a lot of, it's quite different than Taurus can also kind of stuff feelings, but it's quite different because the Aquarius can have them all around and just say, nothing's happening, nothing's happening. And when you talked about the shorter period of time that's kind of making it perfect, I think about the common issues that can come up. And I'm talking about the moon. I apologize. I'll try to take it back out, but I think about people disassociating and disassociating super hard. And that's actually what I was reading about in how can a society move forward if the intensity of what's happening is preventing us from processing emotion or processing information or processing. And so disassociating, which is a psychological concept that you get so wigged out that you kind of take your consciousness and put it somewhere else, is a way to handle trauma where you're protecting yourself. You're not actually going through it. You're in a safe space. And when I think about that process, I think it is fine and fair to disassociate. You're going to do the best you can to kind of handle stuff. And I don't mean to suggest by talking about it in this way that intense things are going to happen. What I'm saying is that time might allow the titration of information and intensity to naturally happen so that it actually lands for folks. So when I'm thinking about this Pluto going into Aquarius, there's kind of a tabula rasa at the beginning, but it could also be described as like astrological jet lag. I feel like more than the other signs, it's going to take a while for us to land into what's more commonly thought of as Aquarian principles: unity, utopia, charity, affection, those kind of things. So disassociation is the first thing I think of when I think about Pluto and Aquarius. And then I think, the remedy is letting things process as they will. And then the final tip is, if you're inclined to disassociate, something that I've learned from therapy, or that's been recommended, is send the trouble, especially if you're wallowing, which can have benefits. If it's an analytical thing that you're doing, put that away and preserve your time in your body. Send the thought away and then see if you can get some time to not experience so much. So I apologize. I have such a curly Q way of talking. I'll pause there. But
Well, and the moon, the topic of the moon, anytime you bring the moon into it, not you meaning collective, all of
yeah,
us, when we start talking about the moon, it always takes us into these deep crevices, and it's like
you're
there's
right.
just way too much to say, right? The moon just gets so exciting to talk about
It's
astrologically.
yeah,
Yeah.
it wants
Yeah.
really cute. But
Well,
oddly enough, the air wants it shorter words, fewer sentences.
yeah. Well, and when astrologers were postulating about what this Pluto in Aquarius was going to look like, the Pluto in Capricorn ending with Saturn was to bring down the organizations and the big
Yes.
structures, right?
Yeah.
And then there was a lot of fear with Pluto and Aquarius and the digital and the AI, which pretty
Right.
much like exploded the minute
Yes.
Pluto looked at Aquarius, which is
Yeah.
hilarious when you think
Yeah.
about it. But one of the things that I said to try to like bring a bit of positivity into the spin was, I'd say, but if we break it down to its simplest terms, Pluto is transformation and Aquarius is collective. And to me, my intention for Pluto and Aquarius was that people as a collective figured out their power, because that's
I like it.
Pluto.
Yeah.
And so as soon as I started seeing like these mass collective protests. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're like, we totally got it. Like, that's
Yeah.
it. This is where, and I think the first thing that happened here in Canada was everybody decided on one day not to shop at a certain grocery store because they'd done
Right.
something dumb. And literally, it was like whatever happened got reversed because it's like the corporation, I mean, they realize really fast your power is where you spend your money and where you put
Yes.
your voice and where you
Yes.
act, you know?
Yes.
And if everybody can work together, then that's where we have our power. And to me, that's the Pluto and Aquarius. That's the heart of the Pluto and Aquarius story. Collectively,
Yeah.
personally, it's how do we want to bring that into our life, and how active in that do we want to be?
Right.
And how is
Right.
that part of our own transformation?
Right. And it's so interesting because then, so we're talking about Pluto and it was just in Capricorn. And that was a time where uh, we were clearing out the, mucky stalls of business, right? And so the ambition got cleared out and power got cleared out. And whether it's concluded or not, I'm saying cleared out, I mean, there was a transit. So there was an impact on all things Capricornian. And that has subsided. And so now we're moving into Aquarius, which has much different philosophies, especially if you look at it with a modern eye. So Aquarius is ruled by Uranus in a modern eye. Uranus is the planet of revolution, of idiosyncratic genius. You will find Aquarius in the chart of inventors and astrologers, right? Like there's a lot of folks who are interested in that stuff. But as we've pointed out on many of the shows before, if you go back to the ancients, Saturn rules both Capricorn and Aquarius. And so Saturn being the last planet that we see, it defines our limits. And so this is another way to look at our limits. And I think of when we're expressing the work of a transit, almost by necessity, you need to see its opposite. You need to see sort of all of the parts of it. So there's injustice and there's hierarchy, and all of these things are not typically Aquarian ideals, but they'll throw them in contrast. And the example I have is that, Canada was going to go for, I don't want to say his name wrong, Poliver,
Polyev,
Polyev, thank you.
you did
Canada
good.
was going to go for Polyev. And then Trump showed up and didn't just say, I'm a king in president's clothing. He was going after Canada like everyone gave him permission to. And after a little bit of that, like whiff of guess where I think you'll be if I'm in charge, Canada was like, you know what? Maybe we don't go for all of the politicians who are for Trump. And different results happened. I don't know that the same happened in Poland, but certainly the same happened in the US and like Minnesota. There was
Australia,
oh, there you go. Australia. You're right. You're right.
because you talk to Australians and they will absolutely credit their last election on Trump because they went left,
Amazing.
running in the other direction from any kind of right wing extremist.
Yeah.
And it just seems like that. So that's another theme globally that
Right.
we've seen with Pluto changing is it's got as
Yeah.
it so uh, Capricorn and Aquarius are both Saturn signs. Okay. So
That's
Pluto
right.
has been in a Saturn sign for a really long time. And
Yeah.
as it's progressed through those Saturn signs, it's become like this the right wing, which is very Saturnian in its sort of
Yes.
fundamental always,
Yes.
right? Like if we were just talking about their fundamental beliefs, is very Saturnian. And it has gotten more and more so as Pluto has, made itself comfortable in Saturn signs, right?
Right.
And so it's like anybody who's even remotely conservative leaning is like there's no choices because that right has gotten so Plutonian and authoritarian and wanting to be a king, right? in all
Yeah.
the countries that
Yeah.
everybody's run the other direction. And Trump
Right.
is just the thing that's made it visible, you know?
Right. And that's kind of what I think of as transits. They make things visible that might not be the outcome. They might be
And
a reaction.
Pluto digs up the trash, like digs
Exactly.
up all the shit that everybody needs to look at.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's what we're dealing with Pluto.
And then we can't conclude that discussion without what's going to carry through the rest, which is it's changed element. We went from being really heavily focused on earth and water almost to the point where it just felt like everything was muddy. And now we're kind of, we're done with that. We would like things to lighten up, spark up, get exciting, have some fun. And that will carry on through as well.
Right, right. And yeah, so we have had the outer planets were in Capricorn, Taurus for Uranus, and then Neptune was in Pisces. So they were all making mud essentially, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now we're moving into air and fire.
Yeah.
And so it's like the vibe is just huge. And just even the fact that collectively we're doing such a massive shift
Yeah.
elementally,
Yeah.
people are tired. Like that kind of change and transformational at one time is exhausting,
Yes.
and it doesn't even need to be transiting your chart in a very direct way.
Right.
I've noticed that anybody who's really marked by water, you tend to be more on the empathic, empathetic side.
Yeah.
And anybody who operates that way in the world is tired because the energy is just too much. It's a lot to process
It's a lot of grief. Yeah.
a lot of grief, a lot of uncertainty is a big one,
Right.
right? Yeah,
Right.
it's a big one. And that it's interesting because Uranus is going to change signs, and really Uranus is the way Uranus approaches things is it gives you the thing you didn't think of. So I just think it's funny when we try to analyze Uranus too deeply.
Right. Impossible.
It will take you by surprise.
That's right.
It's its job.
Yeah.
Now, would you say for the outer planets that, like, to me, there's an element of trust and faith with all of them,
Oh, yes.
right?
Yes.
Like, directly, Neptune, literally, that's one of its key
Literally. But I think
themes,
with
right?
each, there's a process where, because I feel that they describe natural processes, and in each one, there's kind of a barren area, or kind of the sense I get when trying to explain it is you're a competent sailor, you're sailing across the ocean, but you've left any sign of land. And so you are operating with the tools you have at hand, and you're not going to get to the place where you get to go live your new exciting life. You have to orient towards the vision of that or the faith of that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Ooh, and I heard a
absolutely.
beautiful syncretic note. I joined Carolyn Casey's trickster training, and she has calls on Monday. And one of the things that she was talking about was the syncretic power of asking gods to hold you to your commitments. And one of the things with this change, as we, breathe into this new kind of vibe, is that we can say, this is the vision of who I think I'm going to be at the end of this process. And then we can say to Pluto or Saturn or Uranus or whomever we're addressing, can you hold me to that? And then you're working more in cooperation with the energies the planets are going to be bringing you.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a couple of things going on in the chat. So hi, Lori. Hi,
Oh, hey.
Jonathan. I hope I said that right. Um, Lori, we aren't going to talk about the moon placements today, but that would be a great episode to
I would
talk about the
love
moon
that.
through the houses. I would love to talk about that. That's a great idea.
Absolutely.
And Jonathan is asking, what's going to happen when Uranus trines Pluto? Well, we just said you can't predict Uranus, but um, you know, so trines create ease. Now, that's not a good or a bad thing. They just create ease. And
Right.
so because both of them are in air and there's
Mhm.
such a push for digital and AI, and that sector is just thriving right now.
Exploding. Yeah.
My concern with the trine is that legislation opens up to allow AI to do things that we're not comfortable with. More
Right.
so than or we'll also know more, like as soon as they start making that aspect more tightly, we'll learn more about what they have access to. So we're going to
Oh,
get
it's
more
so interesting.
information when those two planets are easily talking to each other. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah,
And
I
I would
feel like,
assume we get varieties. And I don't know if
mhm,
you've seen that, but sort of uh, in the US, I've purchased some things from China recently, and they've been delivered by Chinese delivery places in the US, which is
oh,
really different than, UPS or all of the regulated mail stuff. So I wonder if the connections will be, revealed that are quite different from country to
yeah.
country.
Oh, I like that. Well, and I feel like just based on what's happening in Canada right now and the kinds of deals that our prime minister is cutting, it'll be interesting to what kind of global barriers get moved and changed and dropped, and especially when we're talking about anything in the communication sector, for sure.
That is interesting. I know there's an EU um, rule that they're trying to pass where you have to submit your license. And there's a lot of concern about handing
Okay.
over your physical ID when protections are kind of up in the air at the moment.
Right, right, right,
Yeah,
right. Mm. Well, and we'll see a lot more because something that has not been sorted out with the AI and digital world and the expansion is people's ownership of their ideas.
right.
And that I feel like we're going to have see a lot more of that discussion as people, writers are seeing their stuff come up in ChatGPT, and things like
Right.
that. We're going to see a
Right.
lot more around intellectual property and things like that. I
Yeah.
like that. He said, yeah, Jonathan says Venus is going to conjunct Uranus in the seventh house, expecting an unexpected partner. And maybe you'll find them online because Uranus is very well aspected for digital dating. I'll cross my fingers for you too, Jonathan.
Well, and also there's that sense of with Saturn in a relationship chart, you can expect a lengthy contact, whether it's positive or negative. With Uranus, they may show up and then scoot out just as quickly. That's the only other sort of tip that I would give around Uranus.
Yeah. Yeah. Uranus transits are great if you're bored and you need some kind of stimulation.
Right. And so
Right.
Uranus, since we're kind of moving there, is in Gemini. And I'm glad you're looking at the chat because I cannot see it from where I'm at. I couldn't make it happen. But Uranus going into Gemini, I find that Gemini not only is easily distracted while I touch everything in my room, but is also that's part of the function of having to see the many elements that create a whole. And that Gemini sees best when they're able to sort of um, neutrally observe many disparate pieces of content and then put it together when they've got the full picture. And so even if you aren't looking, there may be people coming looking for you with information when it touches into that Venus.
Oh, that's funny. Um, so what are some of the themes? I have notes. I have notes. Themes, Uranus themes,
Yeah,
liberation and individuation, disruption and surprise. So everybody, if you have Uranus in Sagittarius, then right, Sagittarius, if it's going into Gemini, right? So when
right.
as Uranus goes
Yeah,
through
yeah,
Gemini, you'll be living through your Uranus opposition, which in North America we call
yeah,
a midlife crisis, but it's marked by an
right,
astrological event that everybody goes through.
right.
And so when, if you think about the stereotype of that midlife crisis, what do people do? They end relationships, they have affairs, they buy something wild, it's something that surprises people around them. And generally it
Yes,
happens. Like the more shocking the behavior generally is, the more stuck somebody has felt in whatever situation
right,
they sabotage, right? Because
right,
Uranus needs freedom and needs
right.
independence and autonomy. And so if a person is feeling those things are threatened, then it will do
Mhm.
some kind of a spontaneous behavior to shake that off, you know?
Yeah, yeah. This seems like a good moment to just quickly touch on the transits we're covering. Um,
Sure.
the personal transits are a conjunction, and that's when two planets come together, which could be beautiful. You could be two peas in a pod, and it works beautifully, and you empower each other, and things come from it that are gorgeous, or it could be one is more dominant than the other, or it could be a disaster. So it's how well can you manage that any two energies coming together? And in this case, of course, we're going to go through the outer planets. The opposition is when two planets are opposed to each other. And so when we're talking about a malefic that's opposed, there might be less malefic energy. If it's the benefic, it might be a benefic that's working against you, or you don't get that benefic effect, or at minimum, you go from understanding how something's working away from you to projecting what you think you're seeing onto the people around you. And then
Yeah.
there's the trine, which we've talked about. Is that 130 or 125?
120.
I think it's 130.
120.
And I can see my internet's, thank you. Yeah, my internet's a little wobbly, so I apologize. But that one, as we've said, creates ease, which could be,
It depends very much on the planet. I think we lost Lillian a little bit. Are you back?
I'd like to be
There
back.
you are. You're back. Excellent. Yeah, no, you're here. You're here. Excellent. Um,
That's so
s-
funny. So
so
yeah,
can
go
I
ahead,
add I just want to add a little bit to what you said about the conjunction and the opposition, because when we're
please.
talking about the outer planets, that familiarity with the planetary energy is really going to affect either one of the, well, any of the aspects really. But if it's the conjunction and you don't already have a familiarity with the planet personally, now you have to be careful not to take it on completely. You're learning the energy of that outer planet, right?
I
Whereas
love
if
that.
we're talking about an opposition, then to me, I always see an opposition as seeing something objectively because it's straight across and we can see it. And so it's like,
Yes.
so if you have Uranus, let's just use Uranus because that's what we're talking about. And it's with a bunch of personal
Hmm.
planets, but when it goes opposite, you actually get to see its function because now it's
I
separated
love that.
itself
I love
out
that.
of the clump, right? Um, and so of course, wherever it lands is going to be different for wherever it is in your chart. Um, the trine is
Right.
going to help you easily connect to the energy of that planet. It could be overwhelming or it could be beneficial and a gift. It depends on what your relationship with the planet is, right? And then so
Yeah.
what's your next aspect that you like
And
to look at?
I was going to mention the square, but I'm going to have to scoot back and mention the sextile. And if you don't mind describing those, I think my internet's going to be a little wobbly for a bit. So I'll
Oh,
just
okay.
enjoy. Yeah.
So, I mean, sextiles to me they're an opportunity and they're not super active. So,
Right.
they're something that you need to be paying attention and then take action on if it's presenting you
Mm.
with an opportunity you think would be beneficial in your life. But
Yeah.
often sextiles can be opportunities that we miss because we don't even know how they might benefit us. So we might ignore them, especially from an
Yeah.
outer planet. They're likely to be a bit bigger than we're comfortable with, right?
Right.
And then the square. So squares bring growth through conflict.
Hmm.
That's the basic explanation of any square, whether it's in your natal chart or you're having it by transit.
Right.
And that's how I approach it, anyways. And so, likely, if you're going to have an outer planet squaring a personal planet, some form of conflict, likely external, is going to help you learn the lessons you're supposed to be learning from the outer planet, is how I
Yeah.
see it. What do you think?
Yeah. I think exactly the same way. The language I like to use is mature. So you will be asked to digest information you might not be prepared to, but the end result will leave you more mature and perhaps have more resilience. And then the other piece of it is, unlike other aspects, this conflict can be resolved. You can learn how to use your square, and then it becomes the strength.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. And
Yeah.
then there's also the quincunxes. So quincunxes just create,
Right.
that's the 150 degrees. There's an aspect. I like to describe it as you have two planets talking to each other in different languages, sometimes loudly.
Yes.
Right. And so understanding what the point is can be difficult. But often it's just a need to adjust, right? To
Mm,
sort of change your approach, change the way you look at. And in this case, it's the message from the outer planets. In Often I think how it would feel is feeling out of step with the rest of society on
mm,
whatever that planet is
mm.
in charge of, right? So if you're, let's say, because we're talking about Uranus, you have a Uranus quincunx to your sun, who you are, the sun, is feeling
Mm.
out of step with people's ideas around independence and autonomy and rebellion and change. And so there's something, some kind of adjustment either you
Right.
need to make in your behavior, your thinking around those things. And so they can be uncomfortable, but they don't tend to be big events.
I love that. Love that.
Yeah.
And let's see. I wanted to touch back into the midlife crisis just for a sec. Just
Yep.
in that, I tend to think of the events that happen later in our life that are marked as common events are a chance to open up for the next part of your life. And one of the things that I've found about the midlife crisis is, personally, it felt like I really understood mortality in a way that I hadn't before. And so my priorities shifted. And so that sense of getting a deeper understanding of where you're going, I've found that in midlife crisis. I've found that in people in their 60s, the second Saturn return completion, you may feel that way because you may not have gotten to do what you were supposed to do or wanted to do, but that doesn't mean it's gone. You have a whole nother set of time. And these shaking ups are to give you more information to make plans for that time, not to kind of shrug off in defeat and go hide yourself somewhere.
I like it. Yeah, I like it a lot. We skipped
Yeah.
Neptune. Did I do that on purpose? We didn't go in
Ooh,
order.
how clever.
So I'm gonna this Neptune, that was the it was a Neptune transit that helped me realize that if you don't have the natal connection to the planet, that the transit can be quite difficult. So Neptune doesn't talk to the planets in my chart, and it
Right.
opposed my sun. And so Neptune is the dissolver. It likes to dissolve. It really likes to dissolve ego, and so oppose the sun. You are definitely being faced with your spirituality versus your earthly ego. So that can be uncomfortable. But it's about dissolving boundaries, and the heart of Neptune, I realized, was and somebody said it to me, but I realized that it was the truth, was there was a lot about faith and having faith that I was where I was
Yes.
supposed to be, right? And so there's a huge faith. Neptune is a very spiritual planet, and so there's something to do with faith and your intuition. I know my intuition changed dramatically at that time to the point where I thought
Hmm.
it had gone away. But what I realized was that it was it had changed. It had changed. And I couldn't uh, take it for granted, and I needed to actually learn to work with it as opposed to just having it show up all the times that I needed it. So that was it. And so the Neptune part of the transit was about going deeper into my spirituality and having faith that I was safe to do so.
Oh, it's
But
very good.
on a physical level, a Neptune transit can be extremely draining, whether you have a relationship with it or not. It tends to, especially with the more vitality driven placement, so the Sun and Mars, a Neptune transit can really suck the physical energy out of us and be quite exhausting. So that's good to
Yeah, it
know.
can also, Neptune can also blur the lines between escape and engagement. And it gives you this tremendous, not just intuition, but imagination. I think of it as the collective unconscious. So sometimes I imagine hearing too much from the world. And so the ability to say, this is what I'm feeling versus I'm picking up feelings from other people is helpful. And that the faith that you can have boundaries so that you can stay engaged versus want to escape, and just
Yeah.
kind of keeping an eye on that. Where are you being imaginative or are you letting go of the plot? And it's that tension will be there, so it's not anyone's fault. But in Aries, I hear you. I felt nothing. I felt right before like I was in dirty water up to my the roots of my hair. And then the next day, just whew, thank God, we're out of it. But I think you're right. It's something that we need to keep an eye on because the escapism in Aries will be nothing's happening.
Yeah, well, and the escape route for Neptune is, by escaping reality. And so
Right.
the dangerous Neptune transits lead us into usually substances, and that's when, if you're susceptible to addictions, a Neptune transit can take you down a crappy road for sure. Um, but now the positive side, thank God for my
You'd want
astrology.
to line up some port. You'd want to let yourself.
Oh, sorry, you cut out. Say that again.
Okay. Uh, nope, I totally forgot it. I was
Okay.
waiting for you to come
Yes,
back. I mean,
lining
for
up
me to come
support is
back. Go
important
ahead.
and all that. Yeah, having support is important. I totally agree. But Neptune rules music. And so it was actually the difficulty of the Neptune transit that led me to find the tuning forks and acutonics and how to actually have a positive way to work with Neptune, because Neptune is very much in our bodies. It's running the fascia and the fluids, and then the vibration of any kind of sound or music is very Neptunian, and a great way to connect with Neptune if you're trying to figure out what your Neptune transit is about. So I'd like to talk a little bit about in the context of right now, because Neptune and Saturn are together in Aries, and we have a whole episode about that if you want to go check
Mhm.
it out.
That's
But
right.
so anybody who's got early fire right now, and especially Aries, or anything cardinal, so Libra, Cancer, Capricorn, they're all getting a lot of energy from that Neptune Saturn sitting together. And so somebody described it as, I'm taking two steps forward and then everything vanishes. And so
Oof.
like that's a total combination of those two things, because Saturn is what we commit to, and it's our hard work, and it's the struggle to make things happen. And then Neptune, we just said it dissolves everything. And so it's like that's exactly what that combination would feel like, is that you're putting in all this hard work for nothing. But it's not for nothing. It's you have to have faith that anything that you're putting in right now is faith, the Neptune part is exactly what you need to be doing, and will show its form
Yeah,
once Saturn moves away from Neptune. But right now, the veil
exactly.
of Neptune is hiding the outcome of the work that you're putting into things.
I think that's really good insights. I love that.
Okay. But yeah, because anybody who's sitting with that early Aries energy, specifically because you're getting it in your face, is really going to be feeling that. But any of the
Yeah,
aspects from that
yeah,
combination is going to have some level of discomfort around those themes for sure.
yeah.
Ooh, I love this. So some of the themes for Neptune: longing for the ideal. Love
Hmm.
that. Um, Confusion, disillusionment,
Yeah,
um, dissolution of boundaries. So that's the other thing that's really challenging when you get Neptune and Saturn together, because Saturn is about our boundaries. and Neptune
Right.
dissolves them. So that's definitely that feeling of like nothing is turning out the way you want. Sacrifice is a big Neptune theme. And so that's one of the dangers of a Neptune transit, is that we sacrifice too much of ourselves. We martyr ourselves. We feel too much sympathy or empathy, and we
Mm,
give that energy away because Neptune doesn't have a stopgap, right? The energy just flows.
right.
So yeah,
It's everything. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. That's
yeah.
beautiful.
Thanks. So
Yeah.
we're gonna talk until we knew uh we're just gonna go through the planets until we run out of
That's
time.
it.
So
Yeah.
we've got Saturn. I
Yeah.
did print out notes for Saturn. Um, because I mean, so Saturn marks, it's fascinating. If you ask somebody of a difficult or a really memorable thing that happened in childhood,
Mm,
and then you ask them how old they were almost always 7.
wow.
It's fascinating to me
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
whether it actually happened then or not, that particular age is very important for people. Well, that's the first hard aspect we receive from Saturn, is the Saturn square at the age of 7,
Yeah.
right? And then the
Yeah.
next one is the opposition at
Totally makes sense.
14,
Yeah.
right? And then 21,
Right.
and then 28, 29. And those are all such significant
Wow.
ages, and they're
Wow.
all phases of growing up, because that's what Saturn is about our maturation cycle, and it's about time, you know? What else would
Exactly.
you add about
Yeah.
Saturn?
That's awesome. I really appreciate it. Well, I mean, Saturn, for me, I spend a lot of time with Saturn. I have Saturn natally in Pisces. And so that combination you just described, where boundaries are dissolving, is baked into my chart. And so I imagine a lot of times that there are boundaries instead of sort of trying to cement them, because they don't work like that for me. And then Saturn in Aries, the way, I think about Saturn for around the chart, it's not necessarily hitting anything for me right now. It's close to Pallas Athena, an asteroid. But I look to the house, and then I look to what and Jupiter bring. I think I said this during our last live. They both bring up opportunity. Jupiter brings the I see I'm a little unstable. Apologies. Jupiter brings opportunities that you've wanted and yearned for, and Saturn brings you the work of your opportunities. And so there's kind of a obligation there.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything you
Yeah.
commit to is Saturnian. As soon as you've made a commitment to something, you've made it a Saturn thing.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
I was even thinking about our talk about planetary charity, and how,
Right.
what you donate. And I was like, well, anytime you donate your time, it doesn't really matter which planet you're honoring. You're going to be honoring Saturn also, because Saturn rules time. And so anytime, if you're trying to double
Yes.
work with the planets, right? It's like if you're donating your
Yes.
time, that is a Saturn donation for sure. Oh, I'm losing. Yeah, for
A
sure.
hundred percent. 100%. Especially if you're, I know, I'm so sorry. It's on my list to talk with the internet company. But what I was
You're
gonna
back.
say is the oh good. That sense of sacrifice, we talked about that with the charities. And I love that notion, because that puts it in perspective in a way that the Neptune won't. It's a little bit of sacrifice. It's not everything.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Now that
And I
I know that the internet's wobbly. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that, like, in general right now, because the planets are dipping, the outer planets are dipping in and out of their sign changes. It's interesting that Neptune is there, kind of calming the Saturn down, or blocking the Saturn, I guess, in some ways, because there is a certain amount of faith in the end that we have to have, that we are going to be able to move through what's happening right now. I think that if we could actually see it too clearly, two things could happen depending on what that looks like. We could get lazy because, oh, it'll be fine. Or we could be afraid and then be worried about, be too worried to even do anything to make a more positive outcome for ourselves, right? So we're in such a bizarre time in like history and astrology in terms of what these transits can give us. And it's the more personal you make it, the better, right? Because then you can just take care of what you need and that ripples out in a positive way. Oh, I've
I'm
lost
so
you.
like
Oh, there we go.
exploring technology like a nut job. Okay, so what I was trying to say is um it is so beautiful because you have to attend to your person. And then the side effect of that is you'll be good in community. And I don't know that people know that. If you take care of yourself and you find the corrections for yourself that work, the side effect is being good in community. You don't even have to aim for it.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I've always signed off my newsletter as be kind to yourself, because I think the more
Yeah,
kind to ourselves we are, the more kind we are to others.
yeah, yeah.
And I really think that's the only way forward, but that's just
I
my
agree.
Pollyanna view of the world.
Yeah, I share that. I share that. So we're
Yay.
we're rounding the corner to our completion time. Thanks for the folks who have joined us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yonatan says he has Neptune, Uranus, Lilith, and the North Node all sitting in his first house in Capricorn. That is a busy first house.
Oh my gosh, I want to see a picture. You must look amazing. That's really intense. That's really
A
cool.
lot.
I got
Yeah.
a bunch of planets stacked in the first house too, but I've got Neptune there, so I don't know what it looks like. I've got self-blindness.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're somebody right now who has like Pisces or Aries rising, or Gemini or Taurus, or any of the things like that, these outer planets, the signs that these outer planets are moving through, it's very personal for you if it's in the first house, or if
Yeah.
it's aspecting the stuff in the first house, because that's you, that's who you are in the world.
Mm,
And so yeah, I mean, I have Saturn and Neptune in my first right now, so that's fun.
mm.
It's better. It's fine. Crossing the ascendant was a thing, but it's
It's
actually
fine.
not too
It's
bad
fine.
now.
I dig them. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I've got
yeah,
my own Aries rising who is thinking about that. So
yeah.
what will we talk about next week, do you think?
Well, I think we should talk
Oh,
about the
sorry.
moon through the houses, because Lori would like to know about her moon in the 11th. So let's just go with
Genius.
that. I love it. Yeah, I think that's a great
I love
idea.
it. I love it.
Yay. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you, my beautiful friends, for this. And thank
Oh,
you,
thank
Lori and
you, my
Yonatan. How
beautiful friend.
fantastic. We got
Yes,
to
thank
chat.
you for joining us.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we'll see you all next week, same time, same place.
Yeah, we'll want to hear about your moon. Take care.